Now we're going to return to politics now. The beginning, as we've been telling you, of a 5-day strike by resident doctors. So let's talk to the Shadow Health Secretary, Stuart Andrew, now. Stuart Andrew, very good morning to you. Thanks so much for joining us. I will come to the resident doctors' strike in just a moment, but first of all, I just want to ask you about the news this morning that it looks like Rachel Reeves and the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, have had a change of heart when it comes to raising income tax in the budget. Is that news that you welcome, first of all?
Well, absolutely. I don't want to see any sort of tax rises, particularly income tax rises, but it really does sort of show the sort of mess they're making of it because, the very prospect that there was going to be an increase in income tax has already had an impact on confidence within households. I was talking to the hospitality industry just this week who were saying that their members are reporting that customers are not coming as frequently because they were worried about potential increases in income tax. But equally, it shows that this government just doesn't have the backbone that it needs, because they said they were going to deal with welfare reform. They then capitulated, they backtracked, and that ended up costing us more money in the end. And here we are again. They obviously have had a backlash this week, and they've gone back on what they were suggesting. But all of the time, it's had a real impact on the economy, and that's what's really worrying and frustrating.
Well, we'll have to wait and see what's actually in the budget. The government keen to point out that nothing is set in stone. The budget's still 12 days away. But let's move on to the resident doctors, known before, of course, as junior doctors, a 5-day strike that starts today. Doctors from the British Medical Association are insisting that medics' pay is still way down on 2008 levels, down by a fifth, they say, and they want the government to finish the journey, as they call it, towards restoring that pay. Do you have some sympathy for them?
Well, first of all, let's not forget that the measure that they're using, the ONS has warned against, saying it isn't an accurate reflection. But equally, the Secretary of State for Health, Wes Streeting, said in opposition that dealing with these strikes was simple. It's easy. Just get round the table and you can sort it all out. He is now realising, now that he is in charge and now that he has the responsibility, that it isn't as simple as that. And, he said we've solved the strikes because they gave the inflation-busting pay rises. But we've warned at the time that unless you put some conditions on that too, such as how do you get better productivity in the NHS as part of that deal, then they will just come back for more. And sadly, we were right, and that is what we are seeing today. And my concern is the impact that that's going to have on so many patients up and down the country who are expecting to have an appointment or a treatment in these coming days and will no longer be having them for some time yet.
But the whole issue of pay restoration and the fact that these doctors are so angry because they say they're not being paid enough is a legacy of the last government, isn't it? I mean, you could have tackled this when the Tories were in office.
So the reality is that if that had been the case, then the near 29% that they just got would, as Wes said, will resolve it. Well, it hasn't. And I'm afraid I have to say there are certain elements within the BMA who have become quite militant in this area, and they are doing serious harm. Actually, if you look in the Times today, they have done a poll of some doctors and found that the majority do not support these strikes. And I've spoken to people within the BMA who are really concerned about the direction the organisation's going. But things are going to get worse as well, because this government are introducing the Employment Rights Bill, which will mean that the threshold needed to call a strike is going to be reduced, and they're going to get rid of the minimum service levels that would ensure we had the safe number of nurses and doctors and porters and catering staff within a hospital. That's going to be scrapped. So what is a difficult situation at the moment, I predict it's only going to get worse in the future.
Well, you've announced that the Tories would ban strikes by doctors, but how would that tackle any of these underlying issues? Wouldn't it risk further slumps in morale, and wouldn't it just end up seeing more doctors tempted to leave the country, as so many are now?
Well, we already have this policy for other critical people within our country. So the
A
police, the
total
army,
ban, a total ban on protest.
they are not, they're not allowed to strike. But we still see plenty of people applying to go into those positions knowing that. The reality here is that we need to ensure that the patient's safety is first and in the forefront of our minds. And that is why we're saying that we would introduce that as a policy. It's done in other parts of the world. In Ontario, they have exactly the same policy because they also recognise how important it is to make sure there is a functioning health service happening at all times.
Well, as you say, armed forces and police are completely banned from striking, but there are other essential workers like ambulance staff and railway workers who operate under minimum service requirements, but they still do retain the right to strike. So why would you take that right away from doctors and not those other essential workers?
Well, because it's about the health of our nation. It's about the lives. The people's lives are in their hands. That's why it's so important. But it couples with the minimum service levels that we need to see. This government are scrapping those. I think that's dangerous. I'm really worried about patient safety by scrapping those. And I'm afraid, I think the government are going to rue the day they've even suggested doing this, because I think they're going to have real problems on their hands in the future.
Well, Stuart Andrew, we appreciate your time this morning. Shadow Health Secretary, thanks very much indeed. Thank you.